It starts sometime around 4 p.m. on Sunday. You can't always name it. It isn't quite sadness. It isn't quite fear. It's something that sits just behind your chest and hums quietly while the day fades. The weekend isn't over yet, but something already is. You scroll without reading. You watch without seeing. You try to enjoy the last few hours, but there is something in the way. A shadow. A weight. A feeling that Monday is already here, even though it isn't. Most people think this is a personal problem. A sign of weakness. A lack of gratitude. Something to push through or medicate away. But what if it isn't a personal problem at all? What if what you feel every Sunday evening has a history? A long one. Let's start with what the Sunday Scaries actually are. Psychologists define it as anticipatory anxiety. Not anxiety about something that is happening now. Anxiety about something that hasn't happened yet. Your brain projects itself into Monday morning, the inbox, the meetings, the performance, the pressure, and begins responding to it emotionally as though it were already real. The threat isn't here, but your nervous system doesn't make that distinction. It feels the weight of what's coming, and it responds the way it was built to respond to any threat. With dread. Now here is where history enters. Sunday Scaries did not always exist. They couldn't have, because, for most of human history, there was no Monday, there was no working week, no structured 5 days on, 2 days off. No employer waiting for you at a specific hour. Your ancestors worked in response to need. The harvest demanded everything for a season. Then it was done. Winter demanded rest. Spring demanded preparation. The rhythm of work was set by nature, not by a calendar on someone else's wall. There were hard days, and there were easy days. But there was no Sunday evening. That meant something specific was about to end. The anxiety you feel on Sunday requires something your ancestors didn't have. A fixed structure of time that belongs to someone else. Let's trace exactly how that structure was built. For centuries in Europe, Sunday was the Sabbath, a day of rest mandated by the church. Not a preference, a rule. No work, no trade, no commerce. The day belonged entirely to rest and reflection. But the concept of the working week, 5 days of labor followed by a structured break, did not exist in its modern form until the Industrial Revolution. Before factories, most laborers worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7. Rest was not scheduled, it was stolen. Factory workers in 18th century England would often take Monday off unofficially. They called it Saint Monday. After the intensity of the working week, the body simply refused to begin again so quickly. Workers would arrive late Monday or not at all. Productivity dropped. Factory owners complained. So a deal was struck. If workers came in reliably Monday through Friday, they could have Saturday afternoon and all of Sunday free. This arrangement, which emerged gradually through the mid-1800s, became what we now call the weekend. The weekend was not a gift. It was a negotiation. A calculated amount of rest designed to make the working week sustainable. And the moment the weekend existed, its end became meaningful. Sunday evening was no longer just an evening. It was the last hours before the structure you did not choose reasserted itself. The first documented evidence of widespread Sunday melancholy appears in the historical record almost immediately after the standardized working week was established. Victorian physicians writing in the 1870s and 1880s began noting a pattern in their patients, a specific restlessness, a low mood, a difficulty sleeping that appeared consistently on Sunday evenings and resolved by Monday morning. They called it Sunday Neurosis, not as a casual observation, as a clinical pattern significant enough to document and study. The Austrian psychoanalyst Viktor Frankl wrote about Sunday neurosis in the early 20th century. He described it as the depression that afflicts people who become aware of the lack of content in their lives when the rush of the week is over and the emptiness within themselves becomes visible. Frankl was not describing a fear of Monday. He was describing something deeper. The weekend, he argued, gave people just enough space to feel what they spent the working week too busy to notice. The Sunday Scaries were not about Monday at all. They were about Sunday, about the gap between the life you were living and the life you actually wanted. Monday was just the moment that gap closed again. Now think about what this means for you. Every Sunday evening, when that feeling arrives, your brain is doing something quite precise. It is measuring the distance between where you are and where you want to be. The anxiety is not irrational. It is information. In 2018, LinkedIn surveyed more than 1,000 workers across the United States. 80% reported experiencing the Sunday Scaries. 80%, not occasionally, regularly. This is not a personal failing shared by 80% of the workforce. This is a structural response to a structural problem. A species that evolved to work in response to need, in rhythms set by nature, in communities where rest and labor were shared together, now operating inside a system that decides for them when they are free and when they are not. The dread is the gap between those two things, between the animal you are and the schedule you are living. And the cruelest part is what the weekend itself has become. It is no longer truly rest. Research from the American Psychological Association found that most workers spend a significant portion of their weekend thinking about work, checking emails, preparing for the week, running through conversations they need to have and problems they need to solve. The weekend exists on the calendar, but it rarely exists in the mind. True rest requires the absence of anticipation, and modern life has made that nearly impossible. Your ancient body needed rest that was complete. Seasons of stillness, days with no forward momentum, evenings with no alarm waiting at the other end. What you get instead is 48 hours with Monday already visible on the horizon. The Sunday Scaries are not a quirk of your personality. They are not anxiety that needs to be fixed. They are the sound of a 300,000-year-old body recognizing something that a 200-year-old system still hasn't figured out. That rest, which ends on command, is not really rest at all. That a life measured in working weeks will always leave something unaccounted for. That the dread you feel at 4 p.m. on Sunday is just you, quietly knowing that you were built for more than this.